What happens when a tired black mom just wants to buy apples for her son, but a cashier tries to humiliate her in front of the whole store? You won't believe how one quiet moment flips the entire room on its head. Before we begin the story, write in the comments where you are watching us from. Ava wasn't planning to be anybody's hero that morning. She just wanted to grab milk, apples, and a small bag of candy for Carter, who had been patient all week while she pulled double shifts at the hospital. The kid earned it, with his too big backpack and that hopeful grin that made the hard days a little softer. They stepped into that local grocery store like any other Friday, the automatic doors whining open while Carter tried to balance on the edge of the cart, pretending he was flying. "Mom, can we get the red apples this time?" he asked, eyes bright. "Only if you help me pick the good ones, mister," Ava said, ruffling his curls. She loved these small moments, tiny pauses in a life that didn't leave much room for breathing. They made their way down the aisles, Ava ignoring the sideways glances from folks who always seemed to think a black mother and her son were either lost or stealing. Carter picked the apples carefully, examining each one like a jewel, placing them gently in the bag. Ava felt proud, even in that quiet moment, reminding herself that teaching kindness started small. Then they reached the checkout line, and that's where it started to twist. The cashier's name tag read Molly, and if there was ever a face that looked like it was tired of pretending to be polite, it was hers. Her lips pressed so tight they almost disappeared, eyes narrowed as she scanned the groceries in front of her with the excitement of watching paint dry. Ava placed the milk and apples on the conveyor belt. Carter clutched his candy bag like it was a treasure. Ava gave Molly a warm nod, trying to keep the morning light. Molly just sighed, loud, as if scanning groceries for a black woman was somehow an offense to her day. "Card or cash?" Molly snapped, not even looking up. Ava smiled. "Card." Molly let out another sigh, rolling her eyes so hard it was a wonder they didn't fall out. "Figures," she muttered, just loud enough for Ava to hear. The lady in line behind Ava looked down at her phone, pretending not to notice, like they all do when it's easier to ignore than speak up. Ava felt Carter's grip on her sleeve tighten, his eyes darting up to her, confused. The kid was smart enough to know something was wrong, and that was the part that stung. Ava slid her card across the reader, her hand steady even as her heart pounded. She wasn't going to let Molly see her sweat. Molly took her sweet time bagging the groceries, handling the apples like they were something dirty she didn't want to touch. Then she threw the bag across the counter, the apples thumping hard enough that one rolled out onto the floor. "Guess you should teach your kid to pick them up," Molly said, a smirk creeping across her face. Carter's eyes watered as he bent down to grab the apple, wiping it off on his sleeve. Ava clenched her jaw so tight she thought it might crack, but she knelt down and helped Carter, whispering, "You're okay, baby. You're okay." Standing up, Ava looked Molly dead in the eye. "Thank you," she said, her voice low, calm, but carrying all the weight of the moment. "Yeah, whatever," Molly snapped back, turning her attention to the next customer like Ava and Carter were nothing but a delay in her day. Ava took Carter's hand, his small fingers clutching hers like he was holding on to the only safe thing left in the store. They walked out, the automatic doors whining open again, the bright sunlight hitting Ava's face, reminding her she was still standing. She looked down at Carter, his eyes wide, cheeks flushed. "Mama?" he said softly. "Why did she do that?" Ava paused, feeling the anger burn in her chest, hot and sharp. She took a deep breath, kneeling down to his level. Sometimes people don't see others for who they are, baby. Sometimes they forget we all deserve respect. Carter nodded, clutching the bag of candy like it was his shield. Ava stood up, her spine straight, her eyes forward. She wasn't going to let that moment break her, even if it cracked something inside. And as they walked to the car, the air heavy with the weight of what had just happened, Ava promised herself that she would never let her son think this kind of treatment was normal. She buckled Carter into his seat, kissing the top of his head, the little curls soft against her lips. As she shut the door and took a deep breath, Ava knew that the world was watching, even if people pretended not to see. Because let's be clear, respect isn't something you earn by color or status. It's something you owe, simply because we're all human. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how this unfolds. Ava sat in the car, her hands gripping the steering wheel, while Carter, still clutching his candy bag, kicked his legs in the back seat, trying to act like he hadn't just seen his mom disrespected in public. Ava's reflection in the rearview mirror showed a woman trying to hold it together, a woman who wanted to cry but knew she didn't have time for that. The world doesn't pause for your feelings, especially when you're a black mother trying to teach your son how to keep his head high in a world that sometimes looks down on you for simply existing. She took a deep breath, turned around and said, "How about we go home, put on a movie, and share some of those candies, champ?" Carter nodded, forcing a smile, but Ava saw how his eyes darted back to the store, still trying to make sense of what happened. As Ava pulled out of the parking lot, she noticed a black SUV pulling in, the kind you know belongs to someone who doesn't like being told where they can't park. The driver stepped out, tall, with shoulders that said he carried authority and eyes that scanned the lot with the calm of a man who'd seen enough nonsense for one lifetime. His badge wasn't on display, but the way people stepped aside made it clear he was someone. Meanwhile, inside the store, Molly was still at her post, scanning groceries with that same heavy sigh she gave Ava, tossing items like they offended her personally. She leaned toward her coworker, whispering, "I can't believe the nerve of some people," loud enough for a few customers to hear, while she pretended to be busy with the register. Ava parked her car across the lot. She wasn't ready to drive off, not yet. She needed a moment. She watched people going in and out of the store, living their lives while the weight of what happened sat heavy in her chest. She knew she wasn't the first black mother to get that treatment, and she wouldn't be the last. But it didn't make it right. Inside, the tall man from the SUV walked through the sliding doors, nodding at the security guard, who gave a quick nod back, eyes widening as he recognized him. The man's eyes scanned the store, not with anger, but with the controlled observation of someone who knew exactly how to read a room. He saw Molly, saw the way she stiffened when she noticed him, but she quickly put on that fake smile reserved for people she thought mattered. "Morning," he said calmly as he placed a few items on the counter, a gallon of milk, a loaf of bread, and a pack of coffee. Simple items, but it was the way he set them down that made people notice him. "Morning, sir," Molly replied, her voice suddenly sweet as sugar. Ava watched from the car, her eyes narrowing, feeling something shifting in the air. She didn't know why she stayed, but something told her this wasn't over. Molly started scanning the items, her hands moving carefully now, her eyes darting up to the man's face, searching for something. The line behind him was silent, people sensing that this was not the time to complain about waiting. "Is that all for you today?" Molly asked, her voice softer than a minute ago. He nodded, handing over his card. Molly swiped it, handing it back with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "That'll be it," she said, but before he could turn away, the man looked at her, really looked, and asked, "Did you treat everyone with this level of courtesy today, or just me?" Molly's smile froze, her eyes blinking rapidly. I treat everyone the same, sir." "That's so." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried, landing in the ears of everyone within range. People turned their heads, pretending to check their phones. But their eyes were watching. Molly's hands fidgeted with the receipt, and she placed it on the counter, avoiding his gaze. The man took the receipt, slipped it into his pocket, and said, "Because I heard differently." Then he picked up his bag, gave her a slow, steady look, and walked out, the door hissing open as he stepped into the sunlight. Outside, Ava felt a chill run down her spine as she saw him pass by her car, his eyes meeting hers for a brief second. A nod, a silent acknowledgement that he saw her, that he saw everything. Carter leaned forward, whispering, "Mama, who is that man?" Ava shook her head, eyes still on the man as he walked toward his SUV. "Someone who knows what respect looks like," she said quietly, her voice stronger now. Inside the store, Molly stood at the register, the line moving slowly, customers watching her every move, whispering to each other as she tried to keep her composure, her hands shaking slightly as she bagged groceries. Outside, Ava finally turned the key in the ignition, her mind racing, but her spirit steadying. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but she knew this story wasn't done. "This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay tuned to see how this mother stood her ground when it mattered most." Ava wasn't the kind of woman to let things slide when it came to her son. Not after what she'd been through, not after the look she'd swallowed and the comments she'd ignored just to keep the peace. But that morning, standing in her kitchen with Carter quietly crunching on an apple, she knew peace wasn't enough anymore. "Mom, was it my fault she was mad?" Carter's voice was so small it nearly broke her. She knelt down, holding his hands, looking him dead in the eyes. "Baby, nothing about that was your fault. Don't you ever think it was?" His eyes searched hers for the truth, and she held that gaze until he nodded, chewing his lip to keep the tears from falling. Ava stood up, her back straight, her mind set. She wasn't going to let her son think disrespect was something he had to accept. She grabbed her keys and Carter's jacket, telling him, "We need to run one more errand, champ." Back at the store, Molly was at the register, tossing canned goods into bags like they were nothing but weight slowing her down. Her eyes flickered when she saw Ava walk back in, Carter's small hand clutching his mother's. The store seemed to hold its breath as Ava walked up to the counter, setting down the same apples that had rolled onto the floor that morning. "Forgot to pay for these properly," Ava said, her voice calm but sharp, the kind of calm that carried thunder beneath it. Molly opened her mouth, ready to snap back, but something in Ava's eyes made her pause. She reached for the apples, scanning them slowly, trying to avoid looking up. That's when the door opened, and the tall man from the SUV walked back in, a quiet authority moving with him. The security guard straightened up, giving him a nod, and even Molly seemed to shrink a little behind the counter. He stopped near the counter, folding his arms, watching the exchange without saying a word. His badge was visible now, clipped to his belt, and the words, police chief were clear enough for everyone to read. A customer in line nudged his friend, whispering, "That's the chief." And the words rippled through the small crowd like a spark catching dry grass. Molly's hands shook as she handed Ava the bag, trying to force a smile. "Have a nice day," she said, voice trembling. Ava didn't take the bag immediately. She looked Molly in the eyes, letting the silence stretch, letting the truth of the moment settle in. "I will," Ava replied, taking the bag, her hand steady. "And I hope you remember what respect looks like next time you see a mother and her son." Molly swallowed, her face pale, unable to respond. The chief stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying across the store. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked Ava, his eyes kind but serious. Ava nodded. "We're good now," she said, glancing at Carter, who stood a little taller next to her. The chief turned his gaze to Molly, who fidgeted with the register tape, refusing to look up. "You treat all customers like that, or just the ones who look like them?" he asked, pointing at Ava and Carter. Molly opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, "No, sir." "Good," he said, nodding once, "because in this town we don't tolerate that." A hush fell over the store, people pretending to look at the gum rack while they listened, soaking in every word. Ava turned to leave, Carter's hand in hers, but the chief's voice stopped her for a moment. "Ma'am," he said, "you did the right thing coming back." Ava looked back, a small, tired smile on her face. "Sometimes you have to show them you're not invisible," she replied. She walked out of that store with her head high, Carter matching her stride, the automatic doors opening with a soft hiss that felt like the world finally letting them breathe. As they stepped into the sunlight, Carter looked up at her, his small hand gripping hers tighter. "Mama, you were brave," he said, his voice filled with quiet wonder. Ava squeezed his hand back, looking down at him with a warmth that pushed away the ache in her chest. "Baby, we both were." The store behind them returned to its usual rhythm, but something was different now. People had seen it, had felt it, and even if they pretended not to care, they would remember. Because respect, once demanded, is hard to forget. This is how you stand tall when the world tries to push you down. Share this if you believe respect is a right, not a privilege.